As Meng Wanzhou entered her second full year under Canadian house arrest, firmly grounded from her high-flying executive lifestyle, her father was taking center stage at one of the last major in-person international meetings held before the full force of the COVID-19 pandemic locked down the planet. The Davos World Economic Global Forum in the luxurious Swiss Alps resort was a meeting of what Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland once described as the plutocrats, the world's A-listers, the elite of industry and finance, government, banking, along with a few notable thinkers and celebrities. One of the hottest tickets at the 2020 meeting was a panel chaired by the economist Zanny Minton-Beddoes, a sharp British journalist, the first woman to become managing editor of the Venerable Weekly and one of Forbes' most powerful women in the world. She presided over a half-hour discussion with Huawei's CEO and founder, Ren Zhengfei, and the brilliant young Israeli academic Yuval Noah Harari. They debated whether a new arms race was emerging between China and the United States in artificial intelligence, information-based technologies, and 5G. Beddoes introduced Ren as the head of a company blacklisted by the United States and Exhibit A in the technology arms race. Harari argued that the race for technological dominance and the control of information and people's minds and bodies has real parallels to the nuclear Cold War rivalry between the United States and the former Soviet Union. The only two combatants in this 21st century fight were the United States and China, and Harari saw it shaping up like this: a competition between the state surveillance to which China subjected its citizens and the surveillance capital the US imposed on its masses. To hack human beings, you need a lot of biological knowledge, a lot of computing power, and especially a lot of data. If you have enough data about me and enough computing power and biological knowledge, you can hack my body, my brain, my life. You can reach a point when you know me better than I know myself. And once you reach that point, and we are very close to that point, then democracy, the free market, and actually all political systems, we have no idea what happens once you pass that point, Harari calmly stated. And the outcome of the arms race is really going to shape how everybody on the planet is going to live in 20 to 50 years, humans, other animals, new kinds of entities. In stark contrast, Ren, whose company stands at the commanding heights of network communications and research and development, tried to assuage the suspicions of the room that his company was part of China's nefarious plan to control the internet and the world. Speaking through a translator and frequently smiling through a deeply etched face, Ren was doing his best to project a benign, avuncular presence. If there was a race, Ren argued, it was to better the planet and improve the lives of its citizens by harnessing the wealth-generating potential of new information technologies based on artificial intelligence. Humanity will be able to use technologies to benefit society instead of destroying society, because the majority of people in society aspire for a good life instead of a miserable life, he said. When I was born, that was the time when the atom bomb exploded in Japan. When I was 6 or 7, the biggest fear people had was around atom bombs, Ren explained. But if we take a step back, we see enormous benefits from atomic energy, including the use of radiation in medical treatments. Today, he said, we're seeing fears about artificial intelligence, but we should not exaggerate. The explosion of atom bombs would hurt people, but people can manage that. And artificial intelligence is not as damaging as atom bombs, right? Ren's upbeat remarks came as no surprise to the cognoscenti. As a major Brookings Institution study has dominated, external Chinese government and commercial messaging on information technology is quite different from its domestic messaging. The former stresses free markets, openness, collaboration, and interdependence, whereas the internal discourse emphasizes the limits of free markets and the dangers of reliance on foreign technologies. If the world is embarked on a new arms race driven by an ineluctable quest for technological superiority in artificial intelligence, information technologies, and the adoption of 5G networks, it is a race in which many countries have stumbled badly, attempting to balance the competing pressures of commercialization and economic growth with the demands of national security and the importance of keeping their citizens safe from those who seek to do them harm.
They came slowly and tentatively at first, strolling over the grassy hill that led down to the main lawn of Windsor Park on the banks of the Rideau River in the old Ottawa South neighborhood of the Canadian capital. The rain that was threatening to drench them that day was holding off early on the Sunday morning of the Labor Day weekend that marked the unofficial end of the second summer of COVID-19. September 5th, 2021 also marked 1,000 days in captivity for Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. The Windsor Park arrivals continued to drift in, their numbers growing, answering the rallying cry on social media to gather and walk 7,000 steps, or roughly 5 kilometers, in honor of the two Michaels. It drew upon the monastic ritual that Kovrig performed in his small Chinese prison cell to stay fit and sane. Among them were friends and family of the two Michaels, current and former Canadian diplomats, Canadian senators, the foreign affairs minister and his shadow minister in the opposing political party, ambassadors and high commissioners and their diplomatic staff based in Ottawa, from the United States, the European Union, Germany, Britain, and Australia, and many more men, women, and in some cases their children. Soon their numbers swelled to a few hundred, give or take. It was more than the organizers had expected. Pamela Isfeld, the president of the union that represented Canada's Foreign Service officers, reminded the crowd that even though Kovrig was on leave from his government job to join the International Crisis Group, quote, he is still one of us, and he's not just a respected colleague, he's a beloved personal friend to many of us. Isfeld said that while she had never met Spavor, quote, his friends and family are equally devastated by the hardship he is facing as a result of his unjust and unfair imprisonment. Isfeld called for elected officials to try to find a way to do more to help them. She said the current impasse, quote, presents our leaders with difficult choices, all of which could have profound consequences. And it's up to them to weigh those options. And we definitely do not envy them this responsibility. However, moments like these provide us with an important reminder that there is also a price to pay for the status quo. And right now, that price is being paid by these two human beings, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Isfeld took note of the presence of Canadian diplomats, past and present, and their international colleagues who had shown up to march. Quote, as professional diplomats whose work requires us to live and work around the world, my members and I know that any of us could have been in the two Michaels' shoes. I'm very happy to see as well a number of diplomats accredited to Ottawa. One embassy was not represented, China's. The day before the rally, the Chinese ambassador to Canada, Kong Peiyu, spoke on the phone to the Canadian press. Quote, recently, we have noted that a small number of people here in Canada have been hyping the so-called 1,000 days of the detention of the two Michaels, who are Canadian citizens, making unwarranted accusations against China's handling of the case, close quote, Kong said. This has severely interfered in China's traditional sovereignty, gravely violated the norms governing international relations and international law. The Chinese side firmly opposes that. A few days earlier, the Global Times, the newspaper that is an organ of the Chinese Communist leadership, had an exclusive story based on anonymous sources that reiterated what Dominic Barton, Canada's ambassador to China, had told reporters about a month earlier when Spavor had received his 11-year prison sentence. That Spavor's closed trial had heard evidence that he had photographed airplanes and other military equipment, and that he had shared the information with Kovrig. Kong was pressed in the interview about whether he had more specific information about what Spavor and Kovrig may have done to violate his country's national security. He said the case had been thoroughly reviewed, quote, by relevant Chinese competent authorities, close quote, and pointed to the Global Times report, saying, quote, I haven't anything new to add. Kong reiterated his government's official position that the cases of the two Michaels and Meng Wanzhou were not linked. However, I would like to suggest, as I always point out, that if the Canadian side takes resolute matters to correct its mistake and release Madame Meng at an early date, it will surely help the relationship between our two countries go back to normal. In an interview before the march, Vina Najibullah, Kovard's wife, reiterated what she had long been saying, that neither of the two Michaels were spies and that they had done nothing wrong. She renewed her push for the Canadian and American governments to do more to bring the two Michaels home. She pointed to the upcoming G20 and United Nations climate change summits that would be set for later in the fall of 2021. Both would bring the leaders of Canada, the United States, and China face to face. Maybe she hoped they could talk it out. Perhaps they would have a definitive court ruling from the Supreme Court of British Columbia on Meng's extradition to chew on as well. She was dismissive of the anonymous allegations against Spavor and Kovrig that had surfaced again just days earlier in the Chinese government-controlled newspaper. There will be noise, she said, but the focus since day one has been on bringing them home. The time had come to mark the 1,000-day milestone, quote, to honor the strength and resilience of Michael and Michael Spavor, Najibullah said. In one of his letters, Michael has said that we don't choose our circumstances, but we do have a choice in how we handle ourselves in those circumstances.